Welcome to the Sonocoda Screencast, where we'll be taking a more in-depth look into my composition and the project. But before we go into the video, I'd first like to introduce you to some of the core concepts of the story. So Sonocoda is a very odd world compared to ours. The entire planet is alive with countless strange species, including a sort of spirit dimension that is parallel yet linked to the physical environment of Sonocoda. These spirits are the keepers of the planet. Though mighty they are not invincible. Sonocoda is home to a species with wants, needs, and desires similar to ours. However, unlike us, they are not descendants of apes, but rather evolved into bipedalism from a more canid or feline-like species. Like us, they use tools, ponder about life and the universe, and build vast cities and massive machines. So infrastructure and technology play a big role for them, and while they could be considered more advanced than us, the technology may appear more primitive to ours since everything is powered by steam, including their massive airships that are soaring through their busy skies. Nothing compares, however, to their largest flying machine, which is an entire city that is built on top of a monumental air tank. But the majority of the society has lost sight of the spirits and animals that live among them, and are instead striving for their own success, while forgetting about the world around and below them. And so, in the main story of Sonocoda, which is the story I'm telling with this piece, a small group of brave adventurers try to save their dying planet, which is consumed by these powerful machines that are feeding off the planet's energy. Now that you know a little bit more about the story, let's take a look at the project. So here we are inside FL Studio, which is my digital audio workstation of choice. I like it especially for its flexibility with how you can work with it. I really love their approach to MIDI editing as well, which is the main reason why I use it actually, because this is how I actually compose. This is my starting point. I don't start in Sibelius and then make a digital mock-up here if it's needed. I start with that first. I want that realistic sound first. And then from there, I'll actually take it and import those into Sibelius and then arrange the sheet music so people can actually read it and perform it. This is basically like playing on a piano to me, just with a mouse. And that's of course why the Vienna Symphonic Library is so important for me, because without something like that, I wouldn't be able to do it this way. And it's giving me the ability to translate what I'm imagining into something that anyone could hear. So we're starting with these really dense brass chords. To me, this is really the essence of Sonocoda, of the planet. I'm sensing the atmosphere, the dense atmosphere, you know, all this orange lighting in the cover picture, for example. That's the Sonocoda atmosphere, thick, dense atmosphere. There's a lot of steam, there's a lot of, you know, fog. This is what I'm hearing. And you hear the tension in the planet. You hear the conflict that has been going on for decades. So really, this is the introduction to the planet, to the world of Sonocoda. So right here at the start, right after these dense chords in the brass, we already have one of the most important themes of Sonocoda, which is played by the woodblocks, the basses, especially in the woodblocks. This is basically a theme for this spirit dimension, for these spirits. In a way, it's the heartbeat of the planet. So this is everywhere. So this is a theme for one of the main characters, or probably the main character of the story, which is Sonomi. She is a link between the physical environment of Sonocoda and this spirit dimension. She feels the pain the planet and the animals and the spirits are feeling. This is why she's gathering a group of these adventurers I mentioned in the opening. This group sets out to save the planet and free it from this corruption that's taking place. So the way I have my Synchron player set up is I want to have as few key switches as possible. I have my articulation list set up in a way that allows me to go through basically top-level categories of just playing styles. So I have my short notes, my legato styles. For things like a pizzicato, for example, the short notes, I do have these key switches set up because there, of course, I want that velocity control. But then in things like legato, I'm using the velocity to switch through more playing styles. These I'm controlling with a automation curve anyway, so the velocity controller here is what's controlling the dynamics of the instrument. So there I don't need the velocity control. So that's a free controller to assign to switching through the different playing styles. So here my velocity down here is controlling different playing styles. So here we're getting back into basically a reference to the start with this really dense atmosphere. It's a really strong build-up to give you this sense of that grand adventure that they're embarking on. So instead of bringing this build-up to like a big explosion of sound, which some might expect, it's instead resolving into this really open and cold and mysterious, foggy feel. And really the question is, what's going to happen? Where is this journey going to take us? Which the journey is taking us to one of the first big threats on this world, which is actually one of the animals that inhabit the planet. A giant snake-like flying beast. They have scales, they have 6 eyes and huge wings. They're really massive. They do fly very high up in the sky and high up in the mountains especially. That's where you'll find these, or rather they'll find you. But this theme, I really like how it gets transformed just a couple of bars later, where it's taken over by the cello. So there's a contrast happening, although it's the same melody, the same pitch, but totally different feel. It feels even more tense and rushed. And then we get into this section here, which is really just showing how amazing the Synchron series strings work with the agile legato, which is really fantastic. They sound really amazing. I really love how responsive they are. It's amazing. But you can't forget about the percussion. And it's important to not just have, big bass drum, boom, boom, boom. It's here. But that alone is not enough. If you have just the bass drum and left out the snare drum, it just wouldn't work. The snare drum is really important. So it's really mixing and merging different articulations and, well, not articulations in this case, but different stick positions and some of the rolls and flams to tie together this rhythm. So here again, a very important theme, which is in a way a theme for the story itself, but also the planet. Right here. You know, this breathing section here, which is something I like to do. So this really just gives it life. You can feel the planet breathing. You can feel the vastness, the scale of these forests, of these landscapes. I just really love the trumpets. Let's just listen to this section with just the brass. So what's important for me for orchestration, I really don't think of music so much in chords. So it's basically, I'm approaching it more horizontally than vertically. So what I'm hearing here, the harmony you're hearing here is really evolving out of the different melodies. So this is just a bunch of melodies working together. You know, they work together. So instead of, you know, just thinking chord, instead it's a melody. Each voice has its own melody, and together they then create this tension. They then create this harmony. So really, if I were to give an orchestration tip, it would be to think about what is each line doing, what is each instrument doing and playing. What I like to do with this is really, this is really compressed. So sometimes, you know, you maybe put a bunch of repeats and really flesh out one melody and one theme, and, you know, slowly introduce the next thing and then the next thing. I like to put it all at the same time. So that's why I'm progressing so fast with this piece. So this is like a big story, a big planet, a big world to explore, but a lot of things are happening at the same time, just like when you would, you know, see it and hear it and feel it and smell it. And so I really like to to throw all at once at the audience, which is sometimes a little bit mean, but if you listen, well, it's more reason to listen to it a couple of times over, because then you'll discover more and more things. In this mood shift that's happening in this section, the trumpet is leading with the spirit motive again in a way, which is sort of like a calling out and then getting answered by the other 3 brass instruments, second trumpet and the 2 trombones. So this is sort of a resolution already of the spirit motive and sort of showing the beauty of the planet. And really, so this first movement is really just giving you all the reasons why you should be fighting for this planet, to preserve this beauty, to preserve this beautiful sunshine. So in the second movement, in a way, I'm not trying to scare the audience, not trying to scare the listener. It's a surprising start, a bit scary. I sometimes scare myself with it. So and this is what I mentioned before. This is where this big flying city, this massive airship, where you can hear the spirits inside of that. So they're taking energy from the planet, they're taking resources. So it's all powered by steam. So they need to generate heat, a lot of heat, which is what they use to power everything with. And so here you have the spirit motif, though it's twisted, it's slowed down, it's transformed, it's reshaped, artificial. I'm catching myself forgetting to talk about synchron in Vienna, even though I work in a technical way, adjusting all the positions of in points of notes so they all play together nicely and compensating for the legato transitions. Sometimes in a weird way, I just forget that I'm working with software in the first place. Here, it's easy to miss what the strings are doing. And of course, the brass are then changing the harmony a little bit. So this really bright hopefulness. I really think very visually about music. So imagine like a film. You have an introduction of a character, in this case of this flying city, this big airship, and we then get a slight perspective change and we're seeing our group of adventurers again. So they are trying to talk to them and come to an agreement. So see here they are arriving at that city. So we have this hopeful moment. A lot of unisono sections in this part actually to really support the weight of that theme. And so this is the section where they are then visiting these government people, which are in a way unaware of the destruction they're causing because they don't see below them. They have beautiful gardens. They have beautiful gardens protected by this massive cupola. So this tense moment, it feels suspended, it feels levitating, and that is in a way how they are perceiving these people they are meeting. They are presenting themselves almost godlike. So they have this incredibly scary aura that you don't want to mess with, of course. A lot of uncertainty. But a key component here is actually the timpani, because it grounds this emotion and in a way these people they're talking to, and you get a really clear sense of their intentions. And that's just a single note played by the timpani. Very softly, you might even miss it if you don't pay attention while listening. But here's it without. And now with the timpani. A single note that really defines this moment. Just a single note. Here we have a moment that I pointed out in the subtitles in the second movement with a link to the final movement. This is where you get a display of the power and might of this flying airship, of this massive flying city. And that is a reference directly to the end where we have this section here. So that is a direct link where you're reminded of that might, of that power of this flying city. And so now we get to the third movement, where this is sort of like a break from all this. And so here they have a moment of calm just before the final movement, where of course there's a huge breakout of emotions and things coming to an end. They get to really feel and see the beauty of Sunakota in an untouched landscape. So I think when you listen to this, you'll immediately notice the parallels to that flying city. Because we start out, of course, with the spirit motive, very clearly. And then we have the same motion in the brass that we had before in the second movement, but in its natural environment. So just looking at that contrast, this driving rhythm of that snare drum, this machine-like impulse. But here in the third movement, it's free-flowing. You see, it's wider and there's more change, there's more breathing. And that's where you can really sense the full might of these forces of nature. So that's all still within the spirit motive. And so here's a new theme I haven't mentioned yet. And so really what I'm feeling here is these herds of animals driving through these landscapes. There's so much unisono in this, but just because it's really this driving force. Feel the ground shaking. And then right after that, we have a smaller version of that, just for the smaller animals. And so that's again a section where the percussion is doing a lot, even though it's doing very little. Because that is right here, the cymbal. Just a very small thing, but without it. So that really supports this rhythm and this jumpiness of that melody there and the flutes. And so here they are slowly descending, going deeper and deeper into this forest with these massive trees all around them. And as they get into another section of the forest, they see that the destruction has come even to this place. And so in this section, there's something interesting happening with the orchestration. So far, the strings have been playing in a reduced section, so the smaller sections of the synchron elite strings. which allows them to be even softer and quieter while being very exposed and vulnerable, and then transitioning into the larger sections of Synchronous Strings Pro. They then open up, but allowing to expose even more of this vulnerability, even though it's a larger section. I guess a better way to word it would be to say that they are first holding back and then letting this vulnerability show to its fullest. So in these animals, they aren't defenseless. So they are working against this destruction as well. And of course, also take down machines of these people. And so something that might be a little bit hard to understand about this story is why the spirits, though they are in a way the planet itself, why they aren't working against the machines, against the destruction. They remain neutral. They see that life takes its path and whatever happens needs to happen. But seeing as this progression has reached absolutely unnatural levels, they think that there might be a chance to convince them. And so the question at the end of the third movement is, can they seek out and convince the spirits, the planet itself, to join their efforts? And so the fourth movement is starting with this really loud introduction to give this clear separation of we are getting to our final destination. It of course opens with this very large and dramatic opening. It's very hectic, it's very, we need to get somewhere fast. So there's something interesting happening in the strings actually. So of course there's this very fast section in the violins 2. And so then in the second part of this, what happens is the violas, they join with this. And so together it gets really hectic. And with everything then, of course. So you see, if I have most of this on beside the violas, it still doesn't get its full effect. But now with the violas, it really gets way more hectic. We then get into a more calm section, which is sort of almost like putting us back from a dream and bringing us back into the moment they are in right now. So this is a bit like you're thinking about everything that has happened, but then you look up, it's relatively dark still. You're sort of snapping back into reality and, okay, we know what we have to do, we know where we have to get. So there's an extension on the brass chords. And together with the violas and cello. So with that you really get this sense of slowing down, like a pendulum slowly, still a bit high, but then slowly coming to a rest. The trumpets are amazing. So any of the flute 1, flute 2, clarinet 1, clarinet 2, and so on and so forth, they of course all have a different sound characteristic, which is, one part, of course, if you blend things together, if it's the exact same instrument, the exact same samples, of course, it wouldn't blend well. You'd get weird artifacts of, maybe even phase issues and things like that. But the second thing is, of course, to give you different tonal options, tonal qualities. When I say trumpet 2, trumpet 1, what I really mean in this case is the actual plugin. So this might be trumpet 1 in the score, but I'm using trumpet 2 because of the tonal qualities that this specific patch has to offer. And so here, there's a lot going on with the orchestration, with things flowing into another again. So I think it's actually best if I show bit by bit what this is made up of. So in this section right here, the basses are doing something very similar to what they did in the second movement. Actually, let's take a listen to just the percussion in this section. And so they work together very strongly with the basses. Take a listen with the other strings. And so here is probably one of my favorite moments of the entire piece, which is where we then get to the full development of the spirit motive. So far it has been hiding everywhere. You could feel it hide around every corner. It was in every fiber of Sonocoda. You could feel it, you can sense it in the atmosphere, you could sense it on this massive airship. It was everywhere. But now we're getting to experience them firsthand. And so in this section, it's opening right away with the spirit motive. You hear it again in the wood blocks, which is the main instrument for this spirit motive, actually. But the trumpet is now taking it, leading us into this spirit forest while developing this theme. So it's calling for us. So we know it's the spirit motive. And then it leads us further in. So the spirit forest is essentially in a swamp. So as they were descending into the depths there, into deeper layers of this forest, at one point they had to leave the airship behind. And they're now going through knee-deep and later waist-deep water in this swamp forest. And there's this thick atmosphere everywhere. But there are small bits of light in a number of different corners hiding, because these spirits are essentially watching them from every corner. And so on top of that, we have our trumpet. So now we're really deep in the forest, and there are spirits everywhere. And I want to show again, I want to solo trumpet too, because I think it sounds incredible in this section again. So in this case, for example, I'm triggering a specific dynamic layer, which even though it doesn't play the full sample of that, it will still transition into the next note, and you get the specific attack here. And I'm then putting that down as it's switching into the next note, and putting it back up, while I'm also going from the confortissimo to the regular patches. So let's get rid of this point in the curve here. And now you'll hear it sounds very unnatural and weird. And not at all what I want. So undoing that, we then get this sharpness of the non-vibrato patches. First putting down the dynamic, so to blend that out, going right back into the vibrato patch and pulling up the velocity again. So we have this sharper attack within that vibrato, and it's a very dramatic and expressive character. And so what I think is important here too is we have, of course, the basses. But then it's doubled with the violas. The violas are doubling the basses. And that's something I mentioned in the subtitles in the fourth movement. Now listening to it without the basses. And of course it's missing something in the low end to contrast the trumpet, but it feels too drawn out now. But then with just the basses, we now have that contrast, but it feels too empty. And so the forest, though this does feel mysterious, it's not giving you the sense of this density of that fog. And of course, the percussion is super important here again, with these amazing Burmese gongs. And they really add some more context to the harmony in this case. And so this is where we're sort of taking the final steps into the center of the spirit forest. So and then here, this incredibly tense moment, they come face to face with this incredibly mighty being. And so they are having this encounter, and of course the spirits know what they want and they have followed them on their way. They have a small discussion, which discussion is the wrong word for it, but there isn't a word to describe such an encounter. So they agree to help. it's such a grand moment. It could almost be the end of the story, but of course it's not, because there's still a couple of things that need to be done, of course. But here we do have one big resolution of the spirit motive, transformed, changed, and it's mixing and blending with Sonomi's theme, with our main theme, the adventurer's theme. And it's all already, in a way, coming together, which is a hint at the end. And just like that, we find ourselves moments away from a major conflict which will decide the fate of the planet. They are preparing a counterattack, which this city is of course threatening to bring even more destruction to these forests too, these so far untouched places, and eventually the spirit forest. And so here they are preparing a counterattack to bring down this flying city. And you can imagine them waiting in the darkness with this uncertainty. And then of course we get that massive reveal of that gigantic airship breaking through the clouds and heading towards them, which is that reference I mentioned earlier to the second movement, to a moment in the second movement. So here the strings of course have to work hard again to give us this motion as the skies fill with airships, planes, and there's so much going on. And of course, here we have this massive moment. Every instrument is doing something. And I really want to show you each individual section playing on its own. So we're up in the air. Our group of adventurers are in their airship. They have these small personal flying devices. So you could think of them as very large flying jet ski in a way. But so here we are in the end trying to take down this massive city, which of course they have a lot of means to, well, defend themselves. Here we have then one really pretty section that always makes me a bit emotional because it really gives me this feeling of flying, of feeling the wind rush past you. And this is a section where we follow Sonomi, who is on one of these small aircraft and trying to take out some of the defensive means of this flying city. So she's flying through the sky, up and down and speeding around. And so this is a moment where we get a sense of this flying sensation. Here really the flutes give me this incredible sensation of wind and rushing through the clouds. But then, of course, it all ends in an instant as she is hit and falls from the sky. But this is also where this fight, and I don't mean this fight that has been going on just now, everything leading up to it is resolved in this moment that is actually sad and destructive, because Sonomi is taken, it's a bit hard to describe, but she is taken into this spirit dimension, her essence is, and she's becoming one with them, with the planet. And there's a surge of energy rushing through the planet. And so here we're of course seeing a lot of themes for the animals, for the world itself, for Sonomi, for the journey. And so it's finally all coming together, which was hinted at this moment in the spirit forest. And so here we have Sonomi's theme in the middle of all that. And that's blending and merging together with the spirit motive. And I think you probably noticed that there's a lot of droning happening here, but I want to keep that motion in there. What I did was something, it's sort of like bell-like sound, which happens by something I do every now and then in pieces, actually, when I want to have motion but stay on the same chord. What I do is I give two or more instruments, the two notes of the chord, for example, in this case with the bassoons, and I let them play against each other and changing back and forth. And so that's just an example in the bassoons, but this is then what's happening within the entire section. And then finally, as all this has happened, with fresh energy and a new driving factor, Sonomy, the animals, the spirits, and the very planet itself are taking back what belongs to them. I hope you enjoyed this deeper insight into the story, into the project, and into some of my thoughts of how music can tell a story. And of course, if you haven't had a chance yet to listen to the symphony in full, or you don't want to leave the world of Sunocoda quite yet, then I'd encourage you to either take a look at my website, where you will find all the links pointing to different places where you can listen to Sunocoda. You can of course take a look at the playlist with all the videos released to the Vienna Symphonic Library YouTube channel, which includes all movements animated visually, so you can take an even deeper look at what all the different instruments are doing at every moment of the piece. Or you can enjoy Sunocoda in full without interruptions on my YouTube channel with a video that provides some mood lighting, so you can get just that little bit closer to the world of Sunocoda. You will find all the important links down in the video description. I'm incredibly thankful for the Vienna Symphonic Library to allow me to showcase this piece in such a fashion, to allow me to provide such a deep exploration of the piece, and of course to provide these incredible tools to allow me and other composers to let their imagination come to life like this. Thank you for watching.